Well, basically like the rest of the world, the status of women in Tibet was maybe not of the highest. But on the other hand, it also was not of the lowest, because Tibetan women are very strong. And in a nomad situation, they had equal share in the tasks. They were very strong Kampa nomad ladies. And also even nowadays you see that many of the businesses are run by the women. Women are on the whole very at ease with males, and although of course they do the cooking and taking care of the children, nonetheless their demeanor is not especially subservient. So among the lay women particularly, you see some very, very strong characters. The problem comes more when women join the monastic order, because the status granted to the monks, and especially of course to the lamas, is not usually also distributed to the nuns. And because they have not only an inferior level of ordination, they can only be ordained as far as novices, they do not receive full ordination. In addition, normally nuns were not educated, and so therefore automatically they acquired a much lower level in status in the monastic system. Because despite that, they still had a lot of freedom. People think that if you join a monastery, then you're like being in prison. But actually, there's a kind of freedom there. You don't have to serve your husband and your husband's family. You don't have to take care of running children. You don't do farm work. You have much more time for doing spiritual things, for doing rituals, for doing meditation practice. They had a harder time than monks. On the other hand, they also, compared with what they'd have otherwise. But despite the fact that they had a lower status as a nun, nonetheless they had comparatively more freedom than a married woman, because they didn't have to, take care of their husbands and husband's family and their children, or work in the fields. They had much, much more time for spiritual practices, for devoting themselves to the Dharma, and in benefiting themselves and others through rituals and through meditation practice and through genuinely leading a virtuous life. Well, I think basically there are, not only in Tibet but in the border regions, two types of nuns. One who remained with the family and therefore was basically an unmarried daughter who did most of the work except for the field work. But even though that doesn't look to us like a very enviable role, nonetheless women chose it. And not just because they couldn't get married. They still felt they were freer than having to be married to somebody. And other nuns joined a nunnery, and depending on the kind of nunnery and their emphasis, nonetheless they were a sisterhood. And in some nunneries, of course, with the emphasis on actual practice, some of them became extremely accomplished. Since they were not educated, they had no voice. They didn't write books and they didn't extensively teach, and so we don't know about them. Nobody bothered to write their biographies. But nonetheless, I think that there were really quite a large number of highly accomplished women in Tibet that we don't know about. I mean, it's pathetic. One was in the 7th century or 8th century, and one was in the 11th century. But that's because they were the only, because one was, you know, the consort of Guru Rinpoche, and the other one started a whole tradition of her own, so somebody wrote their biographies. But nonetheless, this shows the poverty of how many role models we have within Tibetan Buddhism for the females. But it doesn't mean that there were not many females there who should have been role models if only somebody had bothered to write their stories. When I brought this up with one Lama, he said, oh, but it's to the advantage of the women that nobody wrote about them, because if people write about you, then you become proud. So therefore, it's a great advantage for the women that nobody wanted to write about them. So I said, yes, that must have been a big problem for Milarepa and others, that, you know, they became so proud when people wrote down their biographies. Well, I mean, I was told that the nuns, they spend their first year learning Tibetan, and then they do their ngundro. After that, they do purba or vajrakilaya. After that, they do a 3-year retreat concentrating on the 6 doctrines of the Ratnalingpa tradition. After that, then they are a certain practice, deity practice, is selected for them. Either they have a feeling for a particular deity, or else one of the 4 tukus in Gechak Gompa selects for them an appropriate tuku, an appropriate deity. So after that, then they enter one of the rooms. You know, in Gechak they have 15 different rooms for 15 different practices. And so then they are placed in the appropriate room where everyone is doing that practice. And then they stay with that practice for life. One of the problems with Guru devotion is that people tend to get caught up in the physical embodiment of the Guru. Whether they're old or young, or, you know, what they look like, that person becomes their Guru. And in the Tibetan tradition, they try to overcome that attachment to the person by visualizing the Guru normally in the form of a deity, such as Vajradhara or Guru Rinpoche or something like this, so that we don't become too caught up in the particular embodiment of the Guru, because that's not what we're going for refuge to. What we're going for refuge to is the nature of the mind, the Buddha nature of the Guru, which he has realized and we haven't. So therefore, along with our attachment to the person of the Guru, is the idea that you need to be near the Guru in order to be in contact. So therefore people are always complaining they don't get to see the Lama enough, or that when the Lama comes he didn't notice them, or they didn't get a chance to tell him all their problems. And they are very attached to the, as I say, to the person. And these prayers of calling on the Lama from afar are a means for us to realize that the moment you think of the Guru, they are there. One time I hadn't seen Kamta Rinpoche for about 2 years. And when I saw him again, I said to him, "Oh, Rinpoche, we've been apart for such a long time. I haven't seen you for ages." And he said, "Haven't you realized even yet that we are never apart, even for one moment?" I don't know. Okay. And this calling on the Lama from afar is to remind us of this, that if we really think of the Lama and visualize the Lama and place the Lama in our heart, we are closer to the Lama than even when they're prayers often when they're sitting in front of us. And of course the prayers also are a very beautiful expression of our highest yearnings, of our highest spiritual yearnings, and they have nothing to do with whether the Lama smiled at me or didn't smile at me, or whether he said something nice or was sharp, and what did he mean when he sort of frowned. It cuts through all of that, and is straight directed from our heart to the heart of the Lama, because in order to really contact the Lama and be in contact with the Lama, we have to be open. The Lama is always open. If he's a genuine Lama, he's always open. But we are usually closed. We are closed because we lack devotion. And because we lack genuine devotion, because we're so caught up in our own ego and its own problems, and we can't just open up, therefore there's a block. His blessings are always there, I mean, the traditional expression is like, the sun is always shining. Or even more clearly, that even though the sun, which is like the Buddhas, are always shining, if you close the window, you don't see it. You close the curtains and you're dark. So what you need to do is open up the curtains, open up the windows, and then the sun is there. So this way of opening up the curtains, opening up our heart, is through these prayers of longing, which we direct towards the Guru in the form of the Buddha, not just in the form that he appears to us in order to relate to us on a mundane level. Ultimately, the Guru, we're calling on the Guru's Buddha nature, on the what can I say, the beginningless consciousness, the unborn awareness. We're calling on that. And obviously, I mean, as is shown in Guru devotion, where you devolve the Guru into yourself, and his mind and our own mind melt together like water and water. I mean, the point is that his true nature and our true nature are not two different true natures. The only difference is he knows that we don't. And so therefore we have to externalize and invoke, just as when we do yidam practice, we call the yidam outside of ourselves into ourselves. But of course the yidam is ourselves. And likewise the Guru is ourselves. But if we say to myself, with my ordinary conceptual mind, oh, I'm really the Guru, then we're kidding ourselves, because we're not. I mean, when we're talking about the Guru, we're talking about the unborn awareness. If we are in direct contact with that, that is the Guru. But if we just go with some kind of nebulous feelings and so-called intuition, then we're just kidding ourselves. That's why they make sure that you remember the Guru outside, so as you don't get caught up in fooling yourselves. Many people going around nowadays saying, oh, the Guru is an inner Guru, I always listen to my inner Guru. I mean, they're joking. They don't have a clue. But it just means the ego enjoys playing at being a Guru. If you meet great lamas, great lamas, and they start talking about their teachers, they just dissolve into tears. Because they know from direct experience what the true Guru was. When he come to Rinpoche, he would talk about Sanji Tenzin, he would just start crying. Oh, he said, if only you could have met my Guru, you wouldn't even look at me. I said, well, I'd probably look at you, Rinpoche. Well, really, it means La, it means something superior, and Ma is a mother. So obviously it means a higher mother. I mean, the lamas won't say so, but I mean, sometimes they say so. But I mean, why is it not La Pa? Well, the mother is cherishing, the mother has unconditional love for her child. A genuine mother loves the child, doesn't matter what the child does, it's my child. And they gave birth to that child, and that child is a part of themselves, and they realize that. I mean, whereas the father is always a little bit more traditionally a more remote and judgmental figure. but the mother will cherish the child no matter what the child is. I think the idea of blessings is the idea of that, you know, it has been proved scientifically nowadays that our minds have a tremendous force outside of ourselves. And everybody knows, like, for example, if you go into a room where there's been a lot of grief, you can feel it. I mean, if you go to Auschwitz, you can feel it. And if you go to, say, Assisi, you can feel it. There's a very, very different feeling, and you don't have to know anything about the history. The minute you go there, you feel the whole palpable atmosphere of the place, because for centuries people have been, you know, thinking either very sad, frightened thoughts or very devotional, loving thoughts, and that permeates everywhere. So thoughts alone have a lot of power, and people know now, they've scientifically proved that prayers and so forth really transform. So when you're dealing with somebody whose mind, I mean, this is the minds of ordinary, undisciplined, untrained people, still it has a power. Imagine the power if you have a mind which is really trained and really realized and totally steeped in wisdom and compassion. That has a tremendous power. And that power is radiating out like the sun. It's illuminating everywhere. Or you could say it's like a radio station. You know, it's sending out beams. But whether we tune in or not, that depends. If you turn the radio off, then even though they're transmitting with the world's biggest transmitter, you don't hear anything. But if you turn the program on and you tune into the right wavelength, then you get the program. And so all this guru devotion is trying to train us how to tune in. The gurus are and the Buddhas are always sending out. But usually we haven't got a clue. We're switched off. And we can't blame the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas because we're switched off. You know, people who are psychic say, they claim, and I think why not, that the thought forms of all the beings who inhabit this planet have, it's like an atmosphere which enshrouds the planet. Now, right now, our planet, as you know very well, therefore, is permeated by the negative thoughts of especially these human beings inhabiting this planet, or their violence, or their fears, or their aggression, or their greed, or their lusts, or their jealousies, or their competitions. Tremendous negative energy is being spilled out continually around the world. And I mean, it's quite frightening, the pollution, the mental, spiritual pollution of this planet, what to speak of the physical pollution. So, if there is anyone in the world, like these Catholic contemplative orders where they pray for the world, you know, and also these places where people are in retreats, and they are sending out powerful, focused, positive energy into the world. This is extremely important. I mean, it's essential. Somebody's got to send out some positive energy. And to my mind, it's like yeast. You know, you have this very heavy dough of most people's egocentric, negative mind. And then you have just even a little yeast of altruistic, loving kindness and compassion for the world. And that lightens the whole thing. And if you take away that yeast, then all you're going to end up with is a very, very uneven dough. Heavy, heavy, and totally indigestible. So these people, not just Buddhists, but Hindus and Christians and Jewish and Islamic, anybody, people no religion, but good heart, who are sending out positive energy into the universe, they are doing a tremendous service to the world. Tremendous service. The world desperately needs good thoughts. Well, one Lama said that the reason why that women now are becoming more powerful is a sign that it's the age of degeneration. But so you can take it from that point of view, or else you can say it's because women are one half of the human race, and up to now it's been an all-male choir. And it's about time that a few sopranos and altos were heard. And that will make a little balance, perhaps, on this earth. I think that women have tremendous potential. And on the whole, this potential has not been realized. Women themselves haven't realized their own potential. They have the intelligence. After all, the perfection of wisdom is female. They have the compassion, because they are geared to become mothers. They have the ability to leap into the intuitive, because their minds are more at ease within the intuitive. And so by rights, they should be the supreme practitioners and the guides for our, new consciousness. But whether or not they take that potential, this is the problem. I don't know. I mean, in theory it sounds wonderful, but in practice you don't see. Basically, in the Tibetan tradition, it means that they were involved in various meditation practices and also in the practices of the inner yoga. For example, that of the inner heat or tumo. And women apparently are better at tumo than men. This is, even if you look in Milarepa, it took him months and months to get tumo, and also Rechungpa. But Rechungma, she got it in 3 days. So, since women were denied usually the avenue of education, of scholasticism, which was very honored in Tibet, what was open for them was the path of practice. So although in some ways it was detrimental, because even though they gained quite a lot of accomplishments, they didn't have the education with which to then actually be able to explain to others what they had realized. Nonetheless, for themselves at least, they were often very, very accomplished practitioners. There are many non-yoginis, and there are lay yoginis. Normally, you would, I guess, what you're thinking is it's someone who does a lot of retreats, and often who lives up in the mountains. This is Tibet. So there were many women who lived in the mountains, in caves or in small huts, often in small communities with a nun teacher or a lama teacher. And they spent their life doing their own practices, whatever they might have been. So those kind of people who lived up there, some of them were nuns, some of them were lay, would be regarded usually as being yoginis. Tumo is for bringing up the lower energies and taking them through the central channel. Usually our energies run in every other channel except the central channel. The central channel is usually closed. And so then this is for bringing up the energies from below up through the central channels to open up the various levels of the chakras, which correspond with various realizations and various levels of bliss, which then are realized in their empty nature. So then you have the unity of the bliss void. And in that way, it's a very powerful way for the opening up of the inner realizations. But outwardly, it manifests because you are visualizing it in the form of a fire, of a flame which rises up and up and up. Then on an external level, the body becomes extremely hot. And so therefore the traditional test is in the midwinter in Tibet to go out at night and dry soaking wet sheets. And so then, the one who dries the most sheets sort of is the winner, I guess. But anyway, that is also in Gechak Gompa, the nuns do this. Also in Tashijong, our yogis do this. It's a traditional sign of your competence in the inner heat meditations. Well, of course, I had been hearing about Gechak for a long time, and also I had met Lama Wangdrak Rinpoche a few years ago, and he, of course, being the abbot of Gechak Gompa, was forever telling us about the wonders of the nuns there. So naturally, we were very curious to finally go and see the place. And, not just in Gechak, but in the other nuns that we met, they are very lovely, the nuns. They are very warm, they are very friendly, they are very devoted. And certainly when I looked at their small little meditation boxes, I also lived for many years in a meditation box, but my box was about this big, and their box was about this big. They're so tiny. I know they have short legs, but still, it was very confined. And the fact that they, and all together like this, it's very inspiring to see people whose whole lives are so totally devoted to practice.